Hi, good morning, everybody. Very excited to be here today. I've been doing a lot of talking the last few weeks, so some of you may have seen some of this information before. But as we keep hearing, there have been challenges with really getting the word out. Not, and particularly with dispensers, which is why this might be focused on dispensers today and tomorrow. But still, there seems to be a level of acknowledgement of the requirements from other entities that just, uh, at least I continue to hear when I've attended different conferences that there are some trading partners in the supply chain that still are not being very active in this area of DSCSA implementation. And here we are in year number 9. And so that's I'm usually am more encouraged and encouraging because we do hear about such progress, which many of the folks on this call and in other groups have been instrumental in getting work done and figuring things out and working through some challenges. And I know we're going to hear some updates on that from some of the other speakers. So um, everything is good. I think my screen is being shared. And so I'll just get right into it. The main thing is to go through where we are. Going to talk a little bit about where we've been, but of course where we are today and what's coming up in the next year, but also a little bit beyond that. I'm going to also summarize a couple of very important rules, proposed rules that we have as well. So my disclaimer is, of course, everything that you will hear today should be available somewhere on FDA's website, whether it be on the DSCSA web pages, or now we have web pages related to the NDC. So as I mentioned, while most of my talk will be about DSCSA, I am going to summarize a recent proposed rule about upcoming NDC changes, because I do think that these use as the stakeholders are also interested in that topic and probably will understand that there are potential impacts to DSCSA implementation as well. So just to remind folks that, the purpose or goals of DSCSA, as I mentioned, it was enacted in 2013, so we're in year number 9. The end goal is to get to interoperable electronic tracing of products that are distributed in the United States. And I apologize if my eyes shift. That's because my display is to the right because I have multiple screens, but I'm trying to keep on camera. As we know, DSCSA provides tools for FDA, but also the industry to help our ability to protect consumers from counterfeit, stolen, diverted drugs, all those drugs that are considered to be illegitimate, and improves the detection and removal of those drugs so that we can ensure that they are not further distributed and they certainly do not reach patients, because that's our end goal, is to protect the patients. And of course, help to increase the oversight of those that are in the supply chain or that are involved in distribution, particularly related to developing standards for licensure for wholesale distributors and third-party logistics providers, or 3PLs. So many of you know this as well. We look at the requirements under DSCSA that are in Section 582 of the Act, and they fall into 4 main buckets: product tracing, verification, product identifier or identification, and authorized trading partner requirements. And we know that amongst the supply chain, we have many stakeholders, but the ones that are legally obligated under the law under DSCSA are considered trading partners, which are defined in the statute now, in our statute. And this includes manufacturers, repackagers, wholesale distributors, dispensers, which is primarily pharmacies, but I'll spend a little time on that. And then third-party logistics providers, or 3PLs. And again, as a reminder, when we talk about product tracing, verification, product identification, and authorized trading partner requirements, they will apply to manufacturers, repackagers, wholesale distributors, and dispensers, not necessarily to 3PLs, because 3PLs typically work on behalf of one of the other trading partners and they do not take ownership of the product. So one key guidance, if that was all too much for you to absorb in the last 10 seconds, we do have a guidance called Identifying Trading Partners under DSCSA, which goes and reviews all the definitions of every trading partner. It also clarifies some terms and entities in the supply chain and where they may fit in the DSCSA trading partner categories, right? So we know we have entities that may be considered private label distributors. And in this current draft guidance, which I do want to note that it is draft, we received comments on it and we are working to finalize this guidance. So based on comments that we receive on any of our draft guidances, we will consider those comments and revise it as needed. But as the current draft says, it gives you our current understanding on some of these other entities in the supply chain, like private label distributors. And basically, this draft guidance describes how we consider we put private label distributors into the DSCSA manufacturing category. And then there are some other entities like salvagers, which is an interesting one that it really depends on the activities that an entity performs that decides which trading partner category it fits in. And in general, that's basically how that's really the bottom line here is what are the activities that you're performing while you're in the supply chain? Those activities are really going to determine which trading partner bucket you or category you fall into. And so I've sort of used these examples just because I may own a pharmacy and my business name is Connie's Pharmacy. If I'm doing other activities that look like and act like a wholesale distributor, then I may be a wholesale distributor, not a pharmacy. So that's just one example. Also reverse returns processors and reverse logistics providers. These are some of the other entities that are described and addressed in this guidance. We also provide clarifications of certain distribution scenarios. For example, distribution of drugs for office use. In addition to, there's some other scenarios like for research or investigational drug use. Those are all also addressed in this guidance as well. And then the last bullet sort of summarizes how we do discuss third-party logistics providers or 3PLs and their status prior to the effective date of those regulations that we're trying to finalize. So I did just talk about trading partners overall. I did want to take a few moments to focus on the dispenser definitions for the dispensers in the room. Realize that DSCSA defines dispensers as this. We say primarily pharmacies because the Section 582 requirements, product tracing, verification, product identifier, and authorized trading partner requirements apply to pharmacies. But recognize that the dispenser definition includes these entities. So you could be a retail pharmacy, hospital pharmacy, or a chain under a common ownership or control. It also includes other persons authorized by law to dispense or administer prescription drugs. And so here this could mean a clinician, a healthcare practitioner that is authorized to dispense or administer drugs. And affiliated warehouses or distribution centers of such entities are also included in this. In other words, if you are for example, a national chain pharmacy organization and you have your distribution centers or warehouses would fall under you as a pharmacy or dispenser, not necessarily as another trading partner. So as you can see, it excludes any entities that act as a wholesale distributor, and of course those who only dispense animal drugs. And so that's and of course it's because we have separate wholesale distributor requirements, and the law of course applies to human prescription drugs. So this slide helps to sort of basically show you on the left which dispensers the Section 582 requirements apply to, and that is the retail, hospital, chain pharmacies. That's why we say primarily pharmacies here. And the right box basically shows you the exemption, which is in Section 582D5, so that the persons that are authorized by law to dispense or administer prescription drugs are exempt from product tracing and verification requirements. So that means the other requirements um, um, would apply. Okay. So these next couple slides sort of review our implementation and what we have done so far, what we've accomplished so far. You know, there were some reporting requirements for wholesale distributors and 3PLs that began around 2014, but the main requirements in Section 582 really began in 2015, and you can see them summarized here. We have authorized, and again, these are in no particular order. It just turned out this way. Authorized trading partner requirement, of course, that has to do with whether if you're a manufacturer or packager, you have appropriate registration with FDA. And then as a wholesale distributor, 3PL, you have a valid state or federal license, and you're in compliance with reporting requirements. Those reporting requirements are annual reporting to FDA. And then if you're a dispenser, you have a valid state license. So product tracing and verification, these also went into effect in 2015. As I'll note on the product tracing, we have lot level product tracing. This, of course, is that transactional documentation, the TI, the transaction information, transaction history, and transaction statements, the TI, THTS, that we've talked a lot about, the data that goes with every sale of product, right, that gets given to the from the seller to the buyer. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in terms of the enhanced requirements as well. But currently, this documentation can be provided in either paper or electronic formats. And then, of course, verification really went into effect and I mentioned this, that these will remain in effect. So when I talk about the enhanced requirements, keep note that these went into effect and they will remain in effect, such as quarantine and investigating suspect product, and also investigating illegitimate product and dispositioning illegitimate product. So these types of requirements continue and remain in effect even after 2023. So I'm just gonna, before I get into the next set of accomplishments in terms of DSCSA implementation, I want to just review and remind folks about the product identifier requirement, which basically was how serialized information is now included with each package or product and potentially homogeneous case. And the reason why I highlight this is because when we talk about the enhanced requirements in 2023, one of the sort of foundational things with the enhanced requirements is they really rely on the product identifier. Okay, and that is the data that is in the product identifier. So we've got the NDC or National Drug Code, the unique serial number, lot number, and expiration date. And the requirement that went into effect in 2018 for manufacturers and repackagers basically puts this information on each package or homogeneous case of packages, so that these are the items that should be on the shelves in the warehouses right now in your wholesale, in your distributor or your pharmacy. For those products that fall within the scope of the law, they should have a product identifier on them. And it's going to be in two formats. It's going to be in the human readable format or printed format so that you can read it. It also should be in a machine readable format, which is that 2D data matrix barcode for packages, which I have a little graphic on this slide as just to demonstrate that. And also for homogeneous cases, though, it can be in a linear format, or a 2D data matrix format, just as a note. So I'm also showing the guidance on this slide as well. This guidance was actually finalized last year, and so it's got a lot of good information in there, but it'll tackle some questions about what should be on the label, how should these data be labeled or represented on a package, And also, I know we often have the question about GTINs and NDCs and those relationships. You always will hear me talk about the NDC and the importance of the NDC, and especially I'll be talking about the proposed rule later. But we do recognize that currently the GS1 GTIN is utilized to encode the GTIN within the 2D data matrix barcode. So that is recognized for the machine readable portion of the barcode, the 2D data matrix. We still feel that that it's not a direct substitute for the human readable portion, which is why this guidance describes why where the NDC is required to be in a human readable format on a package, on its label. And we recognize that if a company voluntarily wants to put the GTIN on the label, they can, but it should not be considered as a full substitute for the printed human readable NDC. So there's a lot more in that guidance. It also talks about the linear barcode requirement because there tends to be some confusion. There's a lot of confusion about which barcode, when is each required, and they are different. The requirements are a little bit different because remember that requirement, the barcode requirement in 21 CFR 201.25, that's the regulation, was initiated years ago to help reduce medication errors and to ensure that drugs could be scanned maybe at the bedside or right before administration so that you can ensure that you're giving the correct drug, the correct dose, and to the correct patient, right? Whereas we have our DSCSA requirements and our product identifier are really there to enable traceability, right? So they're different, but yet they're related or could be related, and that's maybe what we'll talk a little bit more about later. So the other reminder is that we have products that will be out there in the supply, even though I just talked about that very important requirement about product identifiers, and that is a key step in terms of drug traceability. There are products that will be out there that do not have a product identifier, and these are allowed or legal. And this is because they're either drug products that are completely excluded from the requirements of the law, or they're potentially grandfathered products from the requirement. Now, we are at year 9, so hopefully some of those products from 2013 and 14, maybe hopefully they've been used or they've expired and they're out of the supply chain, but we do want to note that there could be grandfathered product out there. The other reason why they may not have a product identifier is they may have received a waiver, exception, or exemption from the agency for that particular requirement. So while you may find a product and you may think that it should have a product identifier, you can always check with the original manufacturer or repackager or who you bought the product from to confirm if it should have a product identifier or not. There is a way that if you really feel that there are egregious labeling issues, you can always report those also to the agency, and we can try to follow up on those. Continuing on with DSCSA implementation, so I just reviewed the product identifier requirements. So those went into effect, as I said, in 2018. And then once I went into effect, the verification requirements changed a little bit. Remember, we're at lot level product tracing, and I would say lot level verification. And now that there are products that have the serialized information, technically you should be able to verify down to that serialized information. Now, we did issue some compliance policies around that time related to verification of saleable returns for wholesale distributors, and then also verification requirements for dispensers to let you, the industry or trading partners, think about the 2023 requirements and how they may be similar. We're trying to ensure that the industry could align some of those efforts in thinking about 2023 requirements for enhanced verification. And so 2023 plus is 2023 and beyond. You've heard me say that before for the enhanced drug distribution security requirements. I'll talk a little bit about what we believe enhanced product tracing and enhanced verification entails. And this is where everything moves to be electronic and also tracing and verification are down to the package level. So again, we have issued a lot of guidances in the last year or so, and several of them are in draft, which we are working to finalize, and a few have been finalized. I'm going to focus now on the enhanced drug distribution security requirements at the package level. So here is the law. Here's the letter of the law. This is Section 582G1, and these are considered the enhanced drug distribution security requirements. What I've done here is I've highlighted some of the key phrases or words within each one of these provisions, and I'll review them in a little more detail in the next few slides. But as I've already mentioned, one of the key things with come November 27, 2023, is that product tracing becomes electronic and in an electronic manner. Okay, and then that's in provision A. And provision B talks about including the product identifier in the transaction information, and I'll review that a little bit. This is how we're getting that serialized information into that transaction history. And then C has to do with verification of the product at the package level. And again, package level, because that means the serial number and the NDC or SNI, that really means utilization of the product identifier information. And D and E have to deal with responding to requests for information, particularly from the FDA or potentially from another trading partner in some cases. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a little bit. And then the last provision F has to do with associating saleable returns with the appropriate transaction information and transaction statement. So this gets to any trading partner that is accepting a saleable return must follow provision F. So related to product tracing, oh, sorry, my light just went out in my office. I think you guys can still see me. I'm sitting too still. So the standards guidance, this one is a key guidance, and while we did issue it as draft, we are working to finalize it. And thank you for those that commented on this. But basically, this guidance updates the one from 2014 and identifies the standards that are necessary to facilitate data exchange, okay? And it's in that secure, interoperable, electronic manner amongst everybody in the supply chain, okay? Well, everybody, I really mean trading partners who are obligated to do so. But of course, one of the key things that came out of this guidance is that we recommended GS1's EPCIS, or Electronic Product Code Information Services standard, to be the standard for providing and maintaining that data associated with the transaction information and transaction statement. Now, the other key statement in this guidance is that we recognize that there's a variety of technological approaches that are available to the supply chain. So we don't expect the trading partners to rely on one single approach, right? So I think that's also being fleshed out in some of these groups that exist. And so those are two very important statements that come out of this particular guidance. So enhanced product tracing. The standards is relevant because it will apply not only to current data exchange, but of course the data exchange is going to occur after November 27, 2023. And so I've sort of grouped these together on this slide just to kind of keep it at a high level. But remember, come 2023, you still have to provide transaction information and transaction statement to your purchasing trading partner if you are a seller. And so this is that exchanged in a secure, interoperable, electronic manner, right? We also note that the provision to provide transaction history sunsets, therefore it would no longer be required to be provided to the buyer. However, we have some other provisions in G that we feel take care of that, right? This has to do with promptly facilitating the gathering of information going back to the manufacturer, which is shown on the right. And then also, these are related to requests that you may receive. So the right side represents that if a regulator, such as the FDA or another trading partner, is requesting certain information because we're investigating a suspect or illegitimate product, there's an expectation that when you're contacted, say by FDA, you, the trading partner, will respond with the relevant product tracing information, and that would be transaction information or transaction statements. And in that way, we'll hopefully get the information that we're looking for, whether it's for one particular transaction or we're trying to gather multiple transactions related to a particular product. There we go. Okay. And also, I alluded to this earlier as well. B talks about including the product identifier into the transaction information. So the transaction information is defined in the law as well. And on the left side, you can see the data elements of the transaction information. And on the right side, it shows you what changes in 2023. You can see that NDC and lot number were already included in TI. However, we need to include the other data elements of the product identifier, and that includes the serial number and expiration date. So after November 27, 2023, the transaction information should include all the data that is listed on the right side. So I'm going to switch a little bit to the verification requirements. We have several guidances, 3 at least, well, 4-ish if you include the enhanced drug distribution security requirements guidance as well, but 3 that really focus on verification requirements. And this particular one is focused on verification systems and provides recommendations for a robust verification system. And this is needed for helping you as a trading partner do determinations of suspect and illegitimate product, quarantine and investigate those products, and also how to handle investigate and disposition illegitimate product. And we also have information in here related to cleared product notifications. So that's where you have a suspect product that you investigate, and you actually investigate it and determine that it is okay and it is not illegitimate. So, FDA, the guidance basically it says, and it's draft, so we'll be finalizing this guidance as well, but we're basically proposing that you don't need to send us all cleared product notifications. We really only need to know about the ones that we have asked you about. And of course, there's some other information related to saleable returns as well for packages and homogeneous cases. So another very important guidance, but I will remind you that we do have these 2 other guidances which are listed at the bottom box of the slide that are related to recommendations for how to identify suspect product and what's the process to follow for notifying FDA when you have found illegitimate product. And the other guidance is the definitions guidance, which helps to clarify some of the terms within the definitions of suspect product and illegitimate product. Of course, enhanced verification is tackled in the enhanced guidance. I'm going to call that for short. And then, oops, let me get my cursor over here. This just reminds folks that we have our Form 3911, which is used to submit drug notifications of illegitimate product to FDA. This is when you have made a determination that it is an illegitimate product, and you're supposed to do this within 24 hours of making that determination. This is also the same form that manufacturers can use for also submitting any products of high risk of illegitimacy. That's only for manufacturers. So do not use this form for suspect product. This is only for when you've determined you have illegitimate product. And You can also use this form for submitting follow-up information, in addition to requesting terminations of your drug notification of illegitimate product. This is what you'll use. You can kind of see there is an instruction sheet that describes each of these fields, but basically you can see that it collects information about the product involved, and then there's some other text fields that allow you to type in and describe some other information or details, and of course, who is the submitter. The other important thing related to illegitimate product is not only notifying FDA within 24 hours, but you also have to notify all your immediate trading partners that may have received that illegitimate product. Okay, so enhanced verification, as I mentioned, this is also reviewed in our enhanced drug distribution security guidance at the package level. There are a couple of provisions related to verification. One, verification of product at the package level. So again, this is dependent on utilizing that product identifier information for verification purposes, and then also return products, such that whoever a trading partner that is accepting a saleable return has to associate that saleable return product with the appropriate TI and TS. So I'm going to switch gears a little bit. I'm doing a time check. I think we're okay here. I'm going to summarize the proposed regulations, the long-awaited proposed regulations for establishing standards for licensure for wholesale distributors and 3PLs. There are some other proposed rules that go along with this. I'm not going to review them, but basically the other two that are listed here for Part 203 are just more considered housekeeping in terms of making sure that the definitions align with definitions into DSCSA, and removing a proposed rule that we don't feel is necessary anymore. So Part 205, though, is the big one that includes the proposed standards for licensure. And if these are finalized, they'll establish those national standards for wholesale distributors and 3PLs that are under Section 583 and 584 of the Act. And so you'll see those here. This is where the authority came from to promulgate these regulations. And, I spent time earlier a little bit on the definitions for dispensers. This sort of reiterates the definition of wholesale distributor in Section 581.29, but it also aligns with the definition for wholesale distribution in Section 503(e)(4) of the Act. And then there's a note about prescription drugs, the definition there, that the definition encompasses, broader than what you may think about in terms of product tracing. For wholesale distribution, it does include distribution of bulk drug substances. And then 3PL definition here is, and I've alluded to this earlier as well, but in Section 581.22 of the Act, we have 3PLs as an entity that provides or coordinates warehousing or other logistics services. And so the proposed rule has included a definition for other logistics services. So the need for the regulation, as we had heard, is we needed to provide certainty and clarity about the regulations. And this is an attempt to harmonize the requirements across states of all the 50 state requirements. Also to improve that integrity on the supply chain to reduce product diversion and minimizing those threats to the legitimate supply chain. The other important thing about this proposed rule is it basically proposed a 2 years effective date after finalization or publication of the final rule. So this is a little bit different for what was proposed for 3PL. So basically, it aligns the two effective dates for WDs and 3PLs. Basically, this summarizes Section 205.4 through 205.19 are the proposed regulations for 3PLs, and you can see they include application requirements and the processes for obtaining a license, renewing a license, and other administrative things, in addition to good storage practices. and requirements for inspection. And then similarly in 205.20 to 205.33, these are the proposed licensure standards for wholesale distributors, and they have pretty much similar provisions proposed there as well. So thank you for those that provided comments. We are working through those now, and we do want to finalize these regulations as soon as we can, but it will take some time to go as these regulations are brand new and fairly complex. We do have a webinar that reviews the proposed rule if you still up and available for viewing. If you want the full review, it's a good 90-minute review of the regulations. And now I'm going to spend a few minutes, the last few minutes, on the proposed rule related to changes to the NDC, or National Drug Code. So this proposed regulation is about revising the National Drug Code format in addition to drug label barcode requirements. And these are the regulation sections that are affected. It's 21 CFR 201 related to labeling, and 21 CFR 207 related to requirements for registration and listing. And most of you are familiar, you know what the NDC is, but it is a unique number that we use in the United States for drugs. And excuse me, you can see that it is in a 3-segment format, and there is some intelligence to this number. The first segment is the labeler code, the middle segment is the product code, and the third segment is the package code. And right now, or currently, we have 3 formats. Oops. Something happened to my sharing. Let me try it again. Okay. Are you able to see my screen?
Not yet.
No.
Okay. Let me try it again. There. Okay. There we go. And again, labeler code, product code, package code. And there's currently 3 formats. And when we say 442, 532, 541, that has to do with the number of digits per segment. So 4-digit labeler code, 4-digit product code, 2-digit package code. That's what that means. So why do we feel that we need to issue the rule now? It's intended to minimize the impact of the transition to a 6-digit labeler code. So right now, I believe there are 5-digit labeler codes that are being issued by FDA, and labeler codes are issued by and assigned by FDA. The full NDC, though, is decided by the sponsor, or the applicant, or the manufacturer, I should say. So under the existing regulations, in other words, if we did nothing, if this rule didn't exist, we still have authority to move to a 6-digit labeler code, and it would have expanded the NDCs to a 10-digit 10-digit NDC if so. However, the rule is trying to be a little bit more proactive and thinking about needs in the future, and proposes something different from the current regulations. And the other reason is because we believe we may run out of the 5-digit labeler codes in about 10 or 15 years, and that the timing of uncertainty would increase the impact. So who's impacted? Almost everybody, we could say. So obviously trading partners in the supply chain that are paying attention to DSCSA, but many others, right? We have NDC is a little bit broader. It affects, both human and animal drugs, and in addition to including OTC drugs, not just prescription drugs. But you can imagine how many systems exist or depend on or use the NDC right now. So anything, many of healthcare systems, payer systems, and so this is why we're trying to get the word out about this proposed rule. Basically, the proposed rule, if finalized, will update the length of the NDC. So it basically would expand the 10-digit NDC to the 12. And so, as I had mentioned, the current regulations would go to 11 if we didn't do any proposed rule. But we have this proposed rule that is basically saying, you know what, we may just want to, we're proposing to go to the 12-digit NDC. And also, it updates the barcode labeling requirements. And so you can see here what is proposed is it would be a 6-digit labeler code, a 4-digit product code, and a 2-digit package code. So the proposed rule not only would standardize the length, the full length of a 12-digit, it also would standardize the format of those codes, of the codes, to be a 642 format. So what are the potential benefits of the rule? Obviously, having a single NDC format would eliminate the need for conversion, and also hopefully, it's possible that would minimize confusion and reduce medication errors that could result from format conversion, as we've seen that happening today. And also, it would provide stakeholders with a specific date that FDA would be issuing the new NDCs. I summarize these in the next few slides in terms of timeline. The next couple slides just summarize the changes in the barcode labeling requirements. So in 201.25c, the proposed rule proposes to allow the use of linear or non-linear barcodes to meet the standards. We also are asking for comment on whether we need to further revise this section, this regulation, so that we can accommodate potential advances in technology and standards, so that maybe there is another data format that will exist in the future beyond linear and nonlinear barcodes. And so if folks feel that's important, we hope that they will comment on the rule. In 207, Part 207, this is the part that focuses on registration and listing, but specifically it defines what an NDC is and how it is assigned. And so I'll just reiterate that it proposes a uniform 12-digit NDC format in addition to the 3-segment format for the labeler code, product code, and package code would be a 642 format. So this one, this slide I want to spend a moment on because it does explain the proposed effective date and a transition period. And right now, the proposal basically has about an 8-year time frame for implementing the requirements once the rule is finalized. So the rule proposes a delayed effective date, so that the requirements don't go into effect until 5 years after the regulation is finalized and published. So at that time, FDA would start converting all NDCs to 12 digits. FDA would also be assigning 6-digit labeler codes and the new 12-digit formats for the NDC. The hope is that stakeholders would have systems capable of handling the new 12-digit formats at that time, and that companies should also start labeling their products with the new 12-digit NDCs. And that because drug listing submissions would also be required to use the 12-digit new NDCs. And then after that, there's a 3-year transition period that's proposed. And during the transition period, FDA will continue to publish and maintain in our database both 10 and 12-digit NDCs. And where there may have been a 10-digit NDC assigned prior to the effective date, they can continue to be labeled on products. However, we really encourage manufacturers to start labeling their products with the 12-digit NDC as soon as possible, such that at the end of the transition period, right, all firms will be required to use that 12-digit NDC in not only in listing files, but also labeled on the products that are introduced or offered for introduction into interstate commerce. And that's also when we would stop publishing the 10-digit NDCs at the end of that transition period. So read those closely. If you have any comments on that as well, please submit that to our comments to the rule, to this proposed rule. So it does close soon, in about a week. I know some groups are actively working on this topic, but these links here provide the information where you could obtain the docket, which is where you submit comments. Also the Federal Register, which actually is the whole rule. And the last link is related to the regulatory impact analysis related to the rule. So here are our resources related to DSCSA, in addition to the barcode rule. I'll just remind folks that what we have planned next is, of course, we are focusing on 2023 requirements. We're going to try to finalize those guidances that are currently in draft. There are some key ones that you should be seeing some updates soon. And as I mentioned, we'll be also focusing on working to finalize both the regulations for wholesale distributors and 3PL licensure, and also the NDC changes. We're going to continue our stakeholder engagement and hope you do as well. There's different venues such as this one, and also other stakeholder groups that are really critical to encouraging not only engagement but collaboration. So we hear that a lot when we meet, and that is very important because so much of this, we're all sort of intertwined, right? And it affects everybody. But I am happy to announce that we announced an upcoming DSCSA public meeting on December 7th and 8th. It's going to be a 2-day virtual meeting. If you haven't registered yet, you're still able to register. You can see the topics that are summarized here. We're really looking for experiences and perspectives on your implementation and readiness efforts for 2023. And we hope that we can tackle some of these other topics as well, looking at for example, building capacity and scalability, best practices, technical capabilities, and other topics related to cost, benefits, etc., and regulatory burden. So there's general sessions, there's also breakout sessions, and you can request to do an oral presentation or oral comments. And so you can see the deadlines there. If you want to be considered for a breakout session where we'll have smaller groups for group discussion, please indicate so and do that by November 28th. If you just intend, you want to listen to the general sessions and just listen, then you can register by December 2nd. And so with that, I think I have hit the mark. We may have a few minutes for some questions.